Rhythm refers to the length and pattern of sounds and silence over time. We often think of rhythm in music or dancing, but rhythm has always been fundamental to the human experience, not only when we do certain types of repetitive work, but even the regularity of our steps as we walk and run, listen to our breath, and even our own heartbeats. This deep connection may explain why rhythm is far more important in a performance than notes. If you mix up the notes, it'll sound, not great, but at least you know what song it is. But even if you get all the right notes, if you mix up the rhythm bad enough, the song can be unrecognizable. Now, rhythmic notation and vocabulary can get pretty complicated and really feel overwhelming, but don't feel like you have to learn it all at once. You can almost think of it like a board game. The basic rules are pretty easy, and you can do a lot with the base game. But after a while, you're ready for more complexity, and you can even start adding expansions. Each one has a bit of a learning curve, but it's manageable if you do it bit by bit. And each installment really expands the possibilities of the game. We'll be covering these 3 in this video, which will be plenty to get you started, and we'll save these other more advanced expansions for upcoming installments. So, let's get started with the rules of the base game. The most fundamental concept to understand about rhythms is the beat, which is the basic underlying sense of pulse in a piece of music. Most of the time, the beat just ticks along at a steady and consistent pace. There can be sounds that are longer than a beat, or shorter than a beat. They can match right up with the beat, or be off the beat. But basically everything to do with rhythms is defined by its relationship to the beat. Tempo refers to the speed of a piece of music and is measured in beats per minute. This piece is at 120 beats per minute, which just happens to be double a tempo that you're already probably very familiar with, the second hand of a clock. You can also use a device called a metronome to accurately determine basically any tempo you like. You'll find music tends to group itself into cycles of strong and weak beats, which are known as bars or measures, and the length of those bars is known as meter. You'll hear 4 beats per bar pretty often. It's an incredibly common meter across nearly every genre of music. It has a strong beat on 1 followed by 3 weaker beats. You'll also hear a lot of music with 3 beats in a bar, which has a strong beat on 1 followed by 2 weaker beats. Meter gives rise to a type of notation called a time signature. It consists of 2 numbers. The top one tells you how many beats are in a bar, and the bottom one dictates what kind of note is counted as the beat. For now, we're only dealing with time signatures with 4 on the bottom, which means we're counting the quarter note, and that covers a ton of music, but we'll explore other options later on. So in 4/4, there are 4 beats in a bar, and the quarter note gets the beat. And a couple of bars of quarter notes look like this. Each one gets a beat, and they're counted for the beat that they fall on. You can also have half notes, which are 2 beats long, and whole notes, which are 4 beats long. So that gives us options for 1, 2, and 4 beat notes. And if we want a 3 beat note, we use a dotted half note. And if there's a different number of beats in the bar, everything still works out exactly the same way. Any whole number of beats in a bar is possible, but some are more common than others. In fact, 4/4 is so common that it's sometimes called common time, and it's notated with a C on the staff. And speaking of different names for the same thing, the British have a different set of names for note values, just like they have for a lot of different words. Use whichever one you like, but I'll be using quarter, half, and so on, not only because that's what I'm used to, but because I think it makes the rhythmic relationships between note values much clearer. Each one of these notes has a corresponding rest, which just means silence instead of sound for some number of beats. One thing to note is that the whole and the half rest look fairly similar. To remember the difference, you might think of the half rest as looking like a hat, the hat rest. And the whole rest looks like a hole that you don't want to fall into, the whole rest. Also, a whole rest is 4 beats long and it hangs down from the 4th line of the staff, and the half rest is the other one. There's also something called a tie, which is a curved line that connects notes of the same pitch to make them longer. They can occur inside the bar or over the bar line. And that's basically all there is to the base game. This stuff can take a bit of practice to get used to, but the patterns and rules are all relatively simple. And not only can you play a lot of music with just these rhythmic concepts, it sets you up for understanding everything that's coming next. If you're ready to move on, it's time for our first expansion, a small and simple but useful tool, multi-rests, the Great Silence. Multi-rests are a shorthand notation for rests that last more than one bar. This passage has a bunch of bars of rest in a row, but it's hard to tell how many there are at a glance, but with multi-rests it's really clear. Multi-rests mostly show up in longer pieces when you're playing with other instruments. Music might get boring if everybody played all the time, so composers often have different instruments or different sections featured or resting at any given time. We usually count them as 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, and so on. That way you can keep track of how many bars have passed and stay in time with the beat. And don't be afraid to discreetly count on your fingers so you don't get lost. It can be pretty easy to zone out and forget what bar you're on. And that's multi-rests, just a quick mini expansion to build on what we already know about rhythms. The next expansion of this game is called Anacrusis and the Modification of Time. Now, that may sound like the title of a fantasy novel, but Anacrusis is a fancy name for a really simple thing. It's probably more commonly known as a pickup note or pickup beat. It occurs when one or more notes precede the downbeat of a bar or phrase, and it's something you've probably been doing since you were little. You might remember the song Bingo. The accented strong beat doesn't happen on the first word, it happens on the second. And it works the same with the wheels on the bus. And the Itsy Bitsy Spider. The notes before the strong beat are the pickup or the anacrusis. Looking at these songs in notation, you'll see a little preview of the rhythms that are coming up in the next video. But all you really need to know right now is that this is beat 1, it's right after the bar line, and this is beat 4. And that's really important to know, because if you're playing music with other people, you want to make sure that you're all starting in the same place, or it can get really messy. Here, you start on beat 3, so you might hear a count off of a bar and 2 beats. Something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. The song Happy Birthday has a 2-note pickup to every phrase of the song, but it also has another interesting feature, because while the beat usually continues at a steady tempo, that's not always the case. This symbol is a fermata. You can put it over a note or a rest, and it just means to hold longer than its usual value. Usually a conductor or soloist will indicate when the group should continue. If not, you'll just have to try to follow the people around you. There's also this marking called a caesura, also known as train tracks, which is a full break where the music pauses for a moment and then continues. It's a bit like a fermata over a rest. The difference is that all instruments stop for a caesura. During a fermata, even though time is stopped, some instruments might be playing while others are resting. Navigating the end of a caesura works the same way as with a fermata. And there are a number of other ways you can modify the rate of tempo using various terms, commonly taken from Italian. It looks like there's a lot of them, but most of them are just variations on speed up and slow down. Don't worry too much about memorizing them all right away. You'll learn most of them through rote and exposure, and at the end of the day, they really all just mean watch the conductor. And that's Anacrusis and the Modification of Time. Sometimes notes come before the downbeat, and sometimes the tempo can speed up, slow down, or even pause entirely. The stuff we've covered today really lays the foundation for understanding everything related to rhythm. In the next video, we'll be looking at subdivision, which is an incredibly powerful expansion. And then we'll get into some interesting time signatures and other useful rhythmic concepts. Be sure to subscribe and enable notifications to make sure you don't miss it. And if you have any questions about rhythm or things you'd like to see covered, let me know in a comment below. Thanks for watching.